Hurricane Ian. This is a Category 4 storm, still at 155 miles an hour. And I'm going to go ahead and take this full for you guys because we've got a whole lot to cover this afternoon because this storm is really about to make landfall. Hello, Felix Acosta. Hello, Sharon Allison. Yes, everyone in Florida definitely in our thoughts and prayers this afternoon because we've got a really serious situation. The latest on Ian is a Category 4 storm, just 2 miles an hour shy of Category 5 strength. And this is literally just off the coast of Southwest Florida. And I'm going live now, and I'm going to take you through landfall to kind of show you guys the seriousness of what's going on. And hopefully everyone in South Florida is there. Sam Yakub checking in from Austin, Texas. Hello, Sam, checking in from right here in Austin. We're mainly dry here, by the way, and we expect to be dry over the next several days. But the focus of this Facebook Live is the latest on Hurricane Ian. Now, I have this stopped because I want to draw where the center of that eye is, because where the center of the eye is, that's once we have the landfall, it is where that center crosses land. So that's eye, the center of the eye is roughly about right in here. You see where I've just put that red dot right in there. I'm going to zoom it in a little bit further to kind of show you, and I'm actually going to zoom it in a little further, and we're going to try writing it in again because this is important. It's important to know where that landfall is. It's about right in here. So once this crosses land, and it's going to cross land shortly, that is when we can officially name landfall. So it is not quite made official landfall yet. It is on the verge of doing so, but we are very, very, very close to that actually taking place. Let me go ahead and clear that and zoom this out a little bit further for you to show you how big this thing is, because look at that. That is a huge tropical system and a very well-defined cyclone, and it's affecting the Florida coastline from roughly around Tampa near the Big Bend all the way down past Fort Myers. And we even have had tropical storm and hurricane warnings for the Florida Keys as well. So a lot going on with this storm, and definitely keep everyone in Florida in our thoughts and prayers. Now, as we take a look at this cone, it's a Category 4 storm, but by the time we get to tomorrow at around this time, it'll either be just passing to the south of Daytona Beach or even over portions of the tropical Atlantic. Now, it'll then pass over portions of Georgia and the Carolinas, bringing heavy rain to those portions of the country as well. Now, this storm is expected to weaken as it makes its way through. However, we do have hurricane warnings that are now in effect. They are for pretty much the entire section of Central Florida. So even all of Southwest Florida, obviously, but we've also got sections of Central Florida and even up through Orlando and Daytona Beach who have hurricane warnings down toward Titusville, Merritt Island, Cape Canaveral, down through Melbourne, and then all the way past western sections of Lake Okeechobee, down through Port Charlotte, Fort Myers, of course, that's close to the landfall spot, and even the Tampa, St. Petersburg, Tampa Bay area. Now, a lot of these models early on had, and I'm going to bring myself up for this, a lot of these models early on had Tampa, St. Pete, Clearwater. So this area here, and I'm going to draw this out for you guys real quick. This area right about in there, hold on. Now, this area right about here, getting a bit of landfall, and then even up to portions of the Big Bend and Texas Panhandle. However, what we've seen from these model runs is that similar to Charlie in 2004, we had the model continuously shift off to the east and continuously shift off to the east and continually shift off to the east. So there was a very wide cone this past weekend for Florida, as you might remember. What's happened is that Ian took the far eastern track of that cone. So in other words, it took the easternmost track of that cone and didn't go straight down the center like what the National Hurricane Center does with these cones. They draw a center line, but then they have a wider cone. And again, impacts could be felt outside of that cone. And obviously, we will be expecting impacts outside of the cone because areas outside of the cone are under hurricane warnings. So I'm going to go ahead and pull Max 1 back up. So to kind of show you guys where the hurricane warnings are. And we're going to pull the radar back up because we're getting very close to landfall now. The center is right around here. It's mainly just off to the west of Sanibel Island, as well as, you know, other portions of the Florida coast, such as Fort Myers, just to the south and west of the Cleveland area as well. And that, you know, I think the landfall will likely be to the north of Sanibel Island, the way we're seeing it. And landfall right now is imminent. So I will go ahead and share this to my professional page, and I'm going to retweet my Facebook Live in regards to this, because we've got a very serious situation obviously developing in Florida, but we are mainly going to be dry here in Central Texas, so don't expect any of that here. So that's what we're dealing with. So anyways, back to the cone, because that's going to be important. This track took the far eastern side of the cone, so near Fort Myers was where we had that. And then as we go hour by hour, I'm going to show you guys what the track's going to look like, and we're going to go ahead and get it started right now. There you go. As it moves through on Wednesday afternoon through Wednesday evening, expect that to weaken into a tropical storm and then eventually make its way out over the Atlantic by tomorrow afternoon. So by that point, tomorrow afternoon, we should see the storm, the last of it, leave the Florida Peninsula. But during that time, it's going to start to really slow down. And when it slows down like that, that's when you get those impressive rainfall totals. It's not just going to be like Harvey where, you know, the storm sits over one spot like a bump on a log, but we should still see impressive rainfall totals, especially as we head through the portions of the day, the rest of today through early on tomorrow, because this storm's going to be a slow mover, and slow movers tend to bring in more rain. So 10 to 15 inches are most likely in this little bullseye right here through portions of the Florida Peninsula, including Orlando, including Daytona Beach, just east of the Tampa, St. Pete, Clearwater area, and obviously up just to the north of where the landfall is going to take place. So yeah, it's going to be a very dangerous situation. We're not just talking about storm surge, but I'll get to that in a minute because that's going to be the main concern. But we've also got some inland flooding that's a threat as well, especially with rainfall amounts that impressive. Now we're going to go ahead and take Max 1 back up here on full because we do have storm surge to talk about. And the storm surge potential mainly around 12 to 16 feet as you head closer to where this center is expected to make landfall, which literally could be any minute now. 12 to 16 feet and a little bit lesser the further north you go, but there were some bays that were absolutely sucked out. Like for instance, we saw this with another hurricane a couple of years ago. I think it was Irma, where you had, hold on, wrong camera. Here we go. I think it was Irma, where you had Tampa Bay pretty much sucked out because of that storm surge. And we're seeing similar situations here with Ian. So when that happens, when you have a backside of the storm, once it makes its way through, then you're going to start to see that storm surge flooding start to pile up mainly along the coastlines. And eventually, as we head down closer to where landfall is. And we've got Port Boca Grande, that could be Captiva. That's what I was trying to say, that other line, Captiva. Looks like it could be where the landfall will be. There is Sanibel just to the south of there. Boquilla, as well as the Pine Island Center and St. James City. So those are the towns, those are the cities where we could officially call landfall. We could officially, we're looking at this again. Let me pull Max 1 up full because it looks to me that it looks like Captiva may have official landfall, or areas just north of Captiva may have official landfall, because that looks like the center crossing over one of those barrier islands there. And I'm going to point out the center once again, and I'm going to change the coloring on it to kind of not distort it with the satellite a little bit. We can get this mouse to move. Okay. Okay, let's get this mouse moving. All right. There we go. Hold on one more second here. We're getting the mouse moving. Once it loads up, we're going to get the curve line set. All right, let's get the color. And let's go ahead, zoom in, and we're going to get that center here, because that looks like landfall to me. Right about here. Right about here, just to the north of Captiva. I'm going to go ahead and color all this in. Kind of show you where that dot is. Let's see, the dot. All right, we've got the dot nicely colored in. Now we have it on now. There you see it. Center, it's right around just to the north of Captiva. It looks like we have landfall of this Hurricane Ian, a tropical cyclone, Category 4 hurricane. Advisory at 1 p.m., but I would not be surprised with, in the next few minutes, where we would get the official word from the National Hurricane Center where we have landfall. As I pull you guys back up here, kind of tell y'all, we are very close to getting official word from the National Hurricane Center that we have a landfall, and I bet you right now it is going to be mainly just either right at or just to the north where I drew that dot. So the reason that dot's there is to show the center of the eye, and the definition of landfall is the center of circulation, the exact center of circulation crossing land. So we need to pay attention and really be focused with this situation. But let's look. I'm looking at my phone right now to see if the Hurricane Center tweeted anything official about landfall. They did post 36 minutes ago that very near the coast of southwestern Florida Peninsula, but we don't have official word on landfall just yet. But what we're seeing right now is we have the center of the eye looking like it's just passed off just to the west of Boquilla, and it's starting to bring heavy rain and strong winds to the Port Charlotte area, just off to the north, as well as Fort Myers and down toward Bonita Springs. You've got a northern eye wall, that quadrants that Shane has talked about. That northeast quadrant doesn't look the strongest. It's looking more like the northwest quadrant, but any of the less, either of the northern quadrants, I wouldn't want to be in a hurricane right now, based on how Ian is oriented with heavy rain and those strongest winds. They look like they are mainly in the northern sections of this storm. There you see it. We're going to zoom it out for you a little bit more. And just south of Sarasota, that's where you've got that. That's where you've got that strong wind and the heavy rain. There you see it with those dark reds, those oranges there. That's some of the heaviest rain, and we are most likely going to be seeing a landfall here shortly of Hurricane Ian, at least as we head throughout the course of the overnight hours, or not overnight hours, later in the afternoon into the overnight hours. So we're very close, folks. We can't really rule any landfall out right now, but it does appear as if there is landfall of Hurricane Ian, a Category 4 storm. We're going to stay on until we get the official word that we have landfall. But I can tell you we are very, very close, at the very least. So definitely want to be precautious about this situation. I'm going to go ahead and share this to my professional Facebook page as well, Jordan Darensbourg on Facebook, so that you guys can see, those viewers can see this particular stream. And we're going to be continuing to monitor this very closely here. So let's talk about what we've just gone over here. What we've gone over is Hurricane Ian so far. It's very close to making landfall right along that southwest Florida coast, just to the west of Fort Myers, just to the north of Captiva Island, near the Bokeelia area of southwest Florida. And we're taking a look at the cone. This cone has a Category 4 hurricane, and it's going to be slowing down and weakening as it makes landfall throughout the course of the night tonight. And then early Thursday morning into Thursday afternoon, we should see this start to dissipate. However, we've got hurricane warnings now, and I'm going to take Max 1 full to kind of show you guys this a little bit more. This is a very, very wide swath of hurricane warning, because this is going to be a very powerful hurricane that makes its way through the Florida Peninsula, probably as powerful, if not more so, than Charley in 2004. Now, it doesn't just include Naples, Fort Myers, up to Sarasota and the Tampa Bay Metroplex. It includes a lot of areas inland, including Orlando, and all the way about as far north as Lady Lake through Sanford and up to Daytona Beach. So, and also along the Space Coast. So a very wide swath of a hurricane warning. So definitely a dangerous situation for South Florida. Hopefully everyone has evacuated that as needed to. And tropical storm watches go all the way out to Gainesville and the Jacksonville area, of course, under that tropical storm warning, because you've got that area of the cone that's going to be shifting back into the Georgia coast and the Carolinas, with tropical storm warnings extending all the way through Savannah, Georgia, the Georgia Bight, all the way up to Myrtle Beach. So if you're having interest in Florida, you may want to check on them as the storm gets closer to landfall. Now let's talk about storm surge, because this is another important component of this. The worst of it will mainly be along where the hurricane makes actual landfall. 12 to 16 foot surge possible near Sanibel and Captiva Island, as well as Bokeelia Island. That is not survivable storm surge. 6 to 10 feet of surge in and around the Sarasota area, and a little bit less so in Tampa Bay, but even that is very, very dangerous storm surge. So that is why it's so important that if people tell you to evacuate, then definitely do so. Also, we have storm surge warnings that are in effect up and down the western Florida Gulf Coast. So Tampa, St. Pete, Clearwater, through Sarasota, through the landfall spot, and maybe even some points south, down including Naples, and down through portions of the Florida Everglades through Monroe County. Those are the areas seeing a lot of that storm surge threat. So storm surge is the real reason. I'm going to put myself back on to talk about this. A lot of people say they evacuate because of the wind. But the real reason there's an evacuation from hurricanes is the storm surge, because that's what causes most of the damage that you see in hurricanes. It's not the hurricane, it's not the winds, it's not the heavy rain, it is the storm surge inundation, because that water pushes on the shoreline and goes way above a normally dry ground. And when it does that, it takes whatever it wants to with it, because that is powerful water coming off of the ocean onto the shoreline, and it can rise up to 12 to 16 feet, even higher than that in stronger hurricanes, similar to what Mississippi experienced during Katrina. And if you've seen past Christiana, Mississippi during Katrina, if you've seen those storm surge gauges, you would know and you would understand. So we're using a lot of historical context when we're dealing with this, because this could be a historic storm. Rainfall amounts, we're going to talk about that for a minute, because as you recall, during the cone, we could be seeing a slowdown of this system. Now, when you get this slowdown, it's not going to necessarily stay in one place. It's not going to be like Harvey a few years ago, where you had the storm pretty much stay in one place for days on end. It's going to move at around 4 miles an hour, and that's going to allow for heavier rainfall and accumulations of up to 15 inches right over portions of that Florida peninsula. A lot of it could result in inland flooding, and inland flooding, again, very dangerous, especially in low-lying areas, in low-lying places like Florida, because Florida, as you may recall, it's not as mountainous as the hill country here in Texas, here in central Texas. It's very flat, very low land, and that can flood very easily if there's so much rain, because remember, Florida, a very humid climate, a very wet climate, so probably will not be able to hold all of that water, and that can cause a lot of inland flooding, and that can cause disastrous consequences as well. And we're going to go ahead and time this out for you, and I'm going to bring Max back up here, and we're going to show you, because it was going to move very slowly as we head through the day tonight and into early tomorrow morning, and then by around 1 o'clock, everything should be wrapped up in the Florida Peninsula, and I hope to goodness we don't have such severe damage, although it is expected with this hurricane. So a lot going on with this storm, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to roll this back, and we're going to kind of show you guys this one more time. There it is. By the time we get to 3, 4 o'clock, moving slowly over the Florida Peninsula just north of Lake Okeechobee, and then passing through the Orlando area early tomorrow before emptying into the Atlantic, just off the Florida Atlantic coast later on Thursday afternoon, before making a slight turn back north, heading into Georgia as well as the Carolinas. So we're waiting on word right now as to whether or not we have an official landfall of Hurricane Ian. But I'm going to pull this radar up full to show you guys, because we do have what appears to be the center of the eye making its way over portions of Captiva Island near the Bakelia area again, passing just to the north of Sanibel. And that's where we have that landfall most likely. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the cone, because the cone, more than likely, let's bring myself back up here, and the cone, what that cone's going to do, that cone, actually not what that cone's going to do, what that cone did was it started off wide, like really wide, once this formed into a tropical storm, and once we started the knowledge that it would become a Category 3 or Category 4 hurricane at landfall. And the reason it was so wide is because models were so in disagreement on whether or not we could get a landfall either in the Big Bend. Some models had landfall as far west as Mobile, Alabama. There were many that went through the Florida Peninsula, of course, and we did have some pass through just to the west of Miami. Now, what ended up happening was very similar to the path that Charlie back in 2004 took. What Charlie did was it started off with a similarly wide cone because you had a whole bunch of models in disagreement. But then with each model run, with each cone forecast by the National Hurricane Center, it moved further and further and further east until it made landfall in and around the Fort Myers area, the Port Charlotte area. And by the way, Port Charlotte, is just north of where this hurricane is landing. So a very similar track to Charlie in 2004. And Charlie, of course, that was a devastating storm, which is now retired by the National Hurricane Center as a result. And I wouldn't be shocked if Ian was retired. Now, I've talked about the ice storm. Now, 12 previous storms that started with the letter I have been retired. Some notables include Ida a year ago. Some notables include Irma, which hit Florida the same year Harvey did. I believe Harvey and then Irma. So it was a difficult 1-2 punch for the United States that year. You had Isaac in 2012. You had Isaias a couple of years ago in 2020 during the pandemic year. That was Isaias. That was a name that was so hard to pronounce, but you know, that's what caused that. And then there were a lot of other ones, like Irene comes to mind. If you're from the Northeast, you would probably remember Irene back in 2011. But yes, this is looking like the 13th ice storm to be retired as a result of this storm, because we have 155-mile-an-hour winds at the last update, and it's looking like it's going to cause major damage to much of Southwest Florida and areas to the south of Tampa. Now, Tampa Bay is going to get some storm surge inundation. Sarasota is going to get some storm surge inundation. There's no doubt about that. But what I feel is that we're going to be seeing some dangerous surge. That's going to be the main threat from this. But you've also got tropical storms, not tropical storm. We've also got heavy rainfall as well as strong winds. Now, winds are the only determinant for the category of a hurricane. Now, the main threat is mainly storm surge. Now, whether this becomes a 5 or not doesn't matter. We're still going to have dangerous impacts from this storm. So we aren't quite close to landfall just yet. Let's see who all y'all doing. We got Omar Mendoza checking all the way from El Salvador. Hello. We've got Emily M tagging a friend of hers who's watching right now. Greetings. I hope everyone's having a safe day here in Central Texas. I hope everyone's having a good day. It's a really nice day to be outside. So we've got plenty to talk about and plenty to break down as we go through. Now we have a 2 o'clock advisory. Right now we're waiting on official word of landfall, but this does look like it may have made landfall here. This is mainly near Captiva Island. I'm going to wait on official word from the NHC. Ian is already causing storm surge, and let's see what we have here. Let's see what we have. The University of Tampa. Yeah, that's just a friend of mine. This is a chat we have for some young meteorologists. We're talking about Ian as well. We're still waiting on word. We haven't received word from the National Hurricane Center yet of official landfall. Let me check that with the Atlantic. And while we do that, I'm going to go ahead and take this loop full so that we can show you guys where we have, let's see what we have. Okay, so catastrophic storm surge. We don't know yet if we have landfall. We are waiting on word. Saying Ian is about to make landfall. It's supposed to have an update at 3 p.m. It's 2:03, so we haven't So it hasn't been updated yet. 3 p.m. information, 20 miles west of Fort Myers, 20 miles, 30 kilometers west of Punta Gorda. Still 155. So we are looking at a new update here. It's landfall in it's about to make landfall in southwestern Florida. We have catastrophic storm surge winds and flooding in the Florida Peninsula ongoing. Of course, we knew that. But a weather flow station, which is at Tarpon Point in Cape Coral, there were sustained winds of 77 miles an hour, and it had a gust of 118. And a river reported a pressure at 942. So we're very close to landfall right now. We don't have official word, but it appears, according to what we have with this eye, that it has done so. So likely, we should hear within the next few minutes, at the very least, the next few minutes, that we have official landfall, because we're looking right now just west of Fort Myers and just south of Port Charlotte, right over Bokeelia Island. That looks like landfall right here, because that hurricane, this hurricane, Hurricane Ian, looks like the center of the eye. And I'm going to draw the center of the eye again, because it's going to be very important to know where the center of the eye is. Remember, it's the center of the eye, not the easternmost part of the eye, not the full eye, but the exact center of the eye. If it has made land, if it has touched land, that very center of the eye, the center of circulation, if it has touched land, then that is landfall. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to take this full and draw that center. And we're going to pause it here. And we are going to draw the center right in there. So, Bokeelia Island, this looks to be your landfall spot if it has not landfalled at the northern end of Captiva Island. So likely this is going to be your landfall spot right about there. And with that landfall spot right about there, we should hear from the National Hurricane Center momentarily that we have landfall. So to the 8 of y'all on here, make sure you're sharing this with your friends that are on here, because this is a very dangerous situation, folks. And I'm going to take myself full here as well to kind of show you guys and clear all this out. And then we're going to show you a couple of things here with this storm that's really going to catch a lot of people's eyes here. I'm going to zoom this out, and we're going to show you guys where you have that circulation. There you see it. Those yellows, those reds, mainly just off to the west of I-75. Some of it's along I-75 just to the south of Sarasota there. And then you're going to have a western eye wall, which I think is going to be more intense than that eastern eye wall, because you've got a lot more rain, and it looks like the fastest winds are mainly in that northwest quadrant, unlike the northeast quadrant where you would normally see a lot of that. And I think what's also happened is there's a bit of an eye wall replacement cycle that might have taken place earlier this morning, and Hunter Williams talked about it last night, and I think we're seeing more of it this morning, because you've got a larger hurricane, a little larger than what it was last night. So could be a bit of eye wall replacement just off the coast of Florida, and we're starting to see parts of the eye now move into the Fort Myers proper. So Point Boca Grande areas just to the south of Point Boca Grande, as well as Captiva, they do have that eye. But the thing about the eye is that it doesn't really make you in the clear by any stretch of the imagination, because you've got a whole other half of that storm to go. And not only that, it looks to be the stronger side of the eye wall than what you had just gone through. So by no means would it be over, which is why you stay inside for the eye wall, for the eye of the hurricane, if you're hunkered down. Now, ideally, if you plan to evacuate, then you should have evacuated. But when you're hunkered down, if you decide to ride it out, then don't get out too soon, especially when you've got the eye of that storm passing right over you. As what those areas over those outermost islands over at Captiva and up towards areas just to the north of Sanibel, over the, let me pronounce that one time, Bakelia area and on towards Flamingo Bay, those areas, that's where you have all of that going on. So again, it looks like a little bit of eye wall replacement, looking like it's starting to happen right as that storm gets close to landfall. So we're watching this, we're paying close attention to this, but what we've got going on is strong hurricane, Category 4, still at landfall. Sounds like Hunter Williams just pulled up behind. Hunter Williams is here. He'll be on at 5, 6, and 10 with the latest on this. But we're tracking this right now. We're staying with you up until we get the official word of landfall from the National Hurricane Center, because we've got a very, very strong Hurricane Ian, and we're going to blow this out a little bit. Oh, we have a 210 advisory. A 210 advisory just came in. We're going to go ahead and read through it real quick to see if we have official work. See, we had a 2:10 Central Time. That would be 3:10 Eastern. So we're going to see right now if we have landfall. We do have official word. We have official landfall that's just been issued. It has made landfall. It is Doppler radar imagery has indicated officially that the eye of Ian made landfall along the southwestern coast of Florida near Cayo Costa around 3:05. So about 6 minutes ago, 3:05. Again, that was Cayo Costa around 3:05 p.m. Eastern, and that is per an Air Force Reserve reconnaissance aircraft, better known as the Hurricane Hunters. The maximum sustained winds were near 150 miles an hour. So slowly weaker, just 5 miles an hour weaker, but still a powerful Category 4 hurricane. The minimum pressure, a little bit higher though, 940 millibars. So powerful hurricane still. However, we do know now that it'll probably be reviewed to see if this was a Category 5, but we can confirm now, just into our newsroom, that we have landfall of Hurricane Ian took place at 3:05 Eastern or 2:05 here in Austin, which would be about just, I would say 7 minutes ago. Just 7 minutes ago, we had report of a landfall of Hurricane Ian. So with that, we're going to go through one more time before we wrap this up. This is the very large wind field of Hurricane Ian, which officially made landfall per radar indication at 3:05 near Cayo Costa, Florida. That's along the southwest coast. And we are going to continue to see these devastating impacts throughout the afternoon, into the evening, throughout portions of the Florida Peninsula as a Category 4 hurricane. There it is. It's now moved onshore, and it's expected to weaken wind speed-wise as it does, but the threat of storm surge, the threat of inland flooding, you name it, isolated tornadoes, those are still in play for southern Florida. And those hurricane warnings, those are still in effect, and they include the entire portions of the Florida Peninsula, not the entire Florida Peninsula itself, but literally from just to the south of Monaco Island, Naples, Chokoloskee, all the way up through the Tampa-St. Pete area. We also have places such as Sebring. If you ever watch auto racing, the 12 Hours of Sebring is there. They're under a hurricane warning, as well as through Orlando and even Daytona Beach and the Space Coast down through Melbourne, Florida. Those areas are under a hurricane warning. There's even a tropical storm warning even for Miami as well, and even extreme southern sections of Florida such as Homestead, Key Largo, and maybe down to Key West as well, even though the Keys, probably this is going to be discontinued for the Keys, but still dangerous situation no matter where you look at it. And storm surge, the storm surge is going to be the biggest threat from this storm, and we could still see heightened storm surges from the storm, especially once that western eye wall moves in, and the highest amounts look to be near the Fort Myers area, near where that eye just made landfall, and a little bit lesser the farther north you go, but nonetheless still devastating flooding for much of southwest Florida, even up through Tampa Bay as well. And that's why we have the storm surge warnings for areas as far north as that Big Bend. And then we've got rainfall amounts that are going to be the heaviest, mainly down the center of that Florida peninsula, especially since the storm is expected to slow down over the course of the night tonight into early tomorrow morning. Now, this is not going to be like Harvey, where we had those 60-inch rainfall totals because that storm just sat there over the Houston area like a bump on a log, but it's going to move at a slow enough pace to where we could get very, very heavy tropical downpours from this storm through portions of Florida. So, yeah, very much a dangerous situation. Hunter Williams is going to have more on this starting at 5 and then again at 6 and 10. And we're going to keep tabs of it throughout the course of the afternoon and evening as, again, Hurricane Ian just made landfall at 3:05 p.m. Eastern Time or 2:05 Central. I'm meteorologist Jordan Darensbourg. Please, if you're in Florida watching this right now, please take care of yourselves and each other. And if you're here in Central Texas, enjoy the rest of your Wednesday. And please be thinking about everyone in Florida.